Once upon a time, a long, long time ago, before our ancestors scratched symbols on hides or cave walls, or recorded tales in books, there was a time when humans and fairies lived in the same world, together in harmony. The fairies were conscious spirits that grew out of the earth, out of wind, seas, and molten lava. The race of humans, according to the fairies, came from the stars. They each had special knowledge and skills, and they freely exchanged their wisdom and songs. No one knows why the humans forgot their origins and became more earthbound, or why the fairies took their magic and retreated to a different dimension behind a veil of mist. At first, few noticed the loss, but over time, members of each race longed for the other and began seeking ways to reunite their worlds. If you are on a quest to find Fairy, there are many paths to wander, but there is only one rule. Allow yourself to go back to the place in your childhood where everything you believed was true and filled with wonder.
As an artist, it was just an idea to make a little house for fairies. It was no big deal. And I did it, and somehow something very special happened. And I found myself going through a gateway into another world.
Fairies are real. Sometimes when I'm very quiet, both inside and out, they tell me their stories, and I write them down so they can be shared with other people. You could wander down every wooded trail, follow each winding stream, track a squirrel, a blue jay, or even a rabbit with a pocket watch, and still never find the old ruin where a fairy statue stands atop a mound of weathered wood and stone. But if you're one of the lost ones, one of the humans with a touch of fairy blood, then you'll follow the music only you can hear.
Two sisters walk by the river's edge, oh, the wind and rain. The eldest pushed the youngest and cried, oh, the dreadful wind and rain. Now Johnny gave the youngest one a gay gold ring, oh, the wind and rain. But he didn't give the eldest one anything, crying, oh, the dreadful wind and rain.
Trees in soft moss dresses and coats wrap their arms around the ancient fairy shrine. Except for the moss-covered carved fairy, the ruin looks unremarkable, and you're tempted to move on. But suddenly, You hear the bells and see a flash of color out of the corner of your eye. You're enticed to look closer.
And the only tune that fiddle would play was
Oh, the dreadful wind and rain.
What are fairies?
A fairy is intelligent energy.
Conscious, animate energy.
Everywhere there is consciousness, there is fairy. A fairy is an entity that has personhood, that has conscious awareness, and exists in that way, not necessarily in form.
Fairy is connected to the natural world. It's not just that it's fantasy, it's that it is a world that is close to nature. It's a world that values basic things in nature and that values play and joy and imagination. In every culture, people have looked at other worlds that are alive around them besides the human world and have said, I need to relate to this somehow. And in the process of learning how to relate to the trees, to the squirrels, to even the stones, to the other things that they share the world with, they found the spirits in those things, the essence in those things. And those are what came to be called fairies. Because everything that is living has an essence.
We anthropomorphize these energies and call them fairies because that's our frame of reference.
Which is not to say, just because we anthropomorphize things doesn't mean that the energies aren't real.
Yeah.
It's simply a matter of we assign them a visage depending on what our sense of reality is.
We don't come to it in a flippant way at all. That doesn't say that we don't come to it with a sense of humor, because it's all a joke, and yet it's all utterly serious, profoundly, universally serious. Sometimes we talk about fairy in language that's pertinent to the spirit world and the mystical realms that we're accustomed to walking in. And then we run into someone who's involved in quantum physics and conceptually find that they're talking about the same things we're talking about. They just have different words for it. I mean, quarks, they're not connected. They can be separated by eons, and one rotates, the other one rotates in exactly the same position. There are forms of dialogue that are like a binary language where you have a positive and negative attraction. You have all those kinds of structures of balance where there is conversation between the two, and one moves, the other moves, and so forth. I mean, these are all forms of languaging, and these are all very simple and elemental forms of fairy.
I spent a lot of years being trained in various shamanic disciplines. And one of the things that I found across disciplines was some sort of lore within every culture about what we call fairies, elementals, little people who are spirits of earth and stone and tree and wood. And in the process of training, I was taught about the little people. I was taught how to relate to them. I was taught how to listen to them. I was taught how to see them. And one of the things that I was taught to do was to, on the full moon, to bring an offering to them of food and sometimes things like crystals and flowers. but particularly of food, because that's an offering from what sustains humans to want to share that with them. And so we built a place in our front yard. It's a pond and a waterfall. It was a special place that it felt like the fairies gathered anyway, and so we made it more special for them. And so every full moon we'd go out on this little mound and leave food and talk to them about what had happened during the last moon cycle and what we were planning for the next one, and things we could use their help with, and ask for inspiration and so on.
We were out feeding the fairies once on the full moon, and the fairies said to us, we'd like to have a house. And I thought, well, that's kind of a fun idea. I'll take a whack at that. And I went into the shop and I pretty much did the first thing that came to my mind. I didn't do a lot of premeditating, and ended up innovating a process, or at least perhaps the fairies taught me a process of making fairy houses that proved to be unique. My way into the fairy world was actually circuitous. I started out life at age 9 as a puppeteer, and in those days was a fairly lonely child and spent a lot of time wandering the deserts and wandering in the mountains. I had more friends that were snakes and lizards than I did playmates my own age. And when I was 9, I found puppetry, and I began making puppets, and there grew in me an awareness of animate objects that were inanimate objects. And for, gosh, a long time, 30 years or more, that was my profession as a puppeteer. And what I was doing there was bringing the appearance of animate life to inanimate objects. Well, when you begin to talk to things like that, inevitably it becomes sort of a meditative thing in which, at times, they seem to talk back to you.
When you get to the point where you realize that everything around you is alive, and you're honoring that everything around you is alive, and respecting that, the better the chance that you're going to see something that could be fairy.
By alive, we mean that it has consciousness, not that it's animate in the conventional sense.
Well, I think what it takes us back to is that original definition of what is fairy. Fairy is intelligent energy.
Yeah, yeah.
And so when you're talking about a snake, when you're talking about the trees, when whatever we're talking about, if there's intelligent energy there, for us, the way that we choose to see the world, it is fairy.
Because we choose to see it that way.
We choose to see it that way.
Yeah,
Because
that's-
that's how we define it. I think that as humans try to integrate with their world, as they try to make sense of it, they know instinctively where the life is. And there are ways of trying to understand life force that's different from their own. And so I think we, as humans, look at those things. We look at the tree or at the squirrel or the cat and say, all right, this is a different life than I am, and yet it is a life, and it must have a spirit too, it seems to. And so how do I define that spirit? How do I relate to this? How do I talk to it? And I think it's in that way that we begin to see that there is energy in all things, and energy perhaps even at levels that we can't quite perceive in the way that we can matter, and that those energies have a presence as well. And we name them, and different cultures name them differently in order to get at the core of what is fairy.
How can I see fairies?
The question something.
We were at a fairy festival, and we had our houses out, and we'd had a steady stream of people through the day coming through the booth and playing with the houses and so on. And this one little girl, she was wearing a pink dress and pink wings. She was very cute. She was probably, I don't know, 3 or 4, quite young. And she looked like she was about to burst into tears. And I said to her, "What's the matter?" And she said, "I can't see the fairies." And she was just really upset. So I said, "Well, would you like some help in trying to see the fairies?" And she said, "Uh-huh." And I said, "Well, okay, look at the fairy house." And she goes, and I said, "You see the fairies?" And she said, "Uh-uh." I said, "Okay, close your eyes and keep on looking at the fairy house." So she went like that. It's really hard squinting. I said, "Now, can you see the fairies?" And she said, "Yeah." And they're sitting down and they're getting ready to have tea. And then she went on for 20 minutes telling about everything that was going on in the household and what the fairies were doing and how they were collecting seeds and da-da-da-da, all this stuff. And I said, finally, I said, "Okay, you can open your eyes now." And she said, "Okay." And I said, "Can you still see the fairies?" And she said, "Uh-huh." But you see, what that somehow called out of her was the ability to see with her imagination. And I gave her permission to believe what she saw. And therefore it grew. And it became indeed an observance of a real event. And that's really the point of it. And that's really the way this functions for all of us, even adults and children alike. She was a child, so she accessed it more readily than some of us might. But
It is very difficult for the fairies to show themselves to us in this world, in this realm, as solid beings like you and I are. So they use light, they use form that's already here, but is malleable, like the bark of a tree.
or the arrangement of the leaves on a tree or something like that.
And those things get formed into shapes where all of a sudden there's a face looking at you. And there may even be an eye that winks a little bit. And you look back at it and it's just, 2 knot holes. But if you soft focus your eyes, or if you look out of the corner of your eyes, then maybe it'll be there again. Or there'll be an image inside. It's like what happens for me when I sit with a fairy house to write the story. There'll be a little something on one of the twigs or on the overall shape that catches my attention. And I will let that just play in my creativity. And the next thing I know, there's this character in my head talking to me. Now, I could say, "Oh, I've got a good imagination," but if I let it play, if I let the character talk to me, if I give it essentially flesh, then it becomes a full-blown fairy and talks to me and tells me about its house. Yeah.
A lot of times this stuff is very circumstantial and very pertinent to a given situation. I was once down in LA worrying about our house. We had had a burglary and I wanted to protect the house, so I started walking around the block and calling energy to protect our house. And I looked up at this tree and there was a dragon going like this. And in the flow of my conscious thoughts about the subject, I was asking for help. Okay, so I look up at the tree and there's a dragon saying, "I'm going to take care of this side. You don't have to worry about this side. I'll ward him off." And I kept on walking around the block, and I continually found a series of images like that, which were ferocious beasts, and each one was in one of the quadrants protecting our land. That was right in the flow of my thoughts, my internal conversation. And it was as though I was talking to something. And it didn't matter that it was animate, because what mattered was that it was timely and in harmony with my conversation.
When you say, where are the fairies? They're everywhere. They're everywhere where there is something else that has animate energy. In order to find fairies, you have to want to find fairies. If you're open to the possibility of there being fairies for you to find,
You have to get used to the way in which the universe communicates with us. I mean, first of all, you have to be prepared for the fact that there isn't any title music. There's no clap of thunder when something important happens, or kettle drums going bum, 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 bum. You know, it just happens. And it's sometimes very, very subtle, and you go, wait a minute, what happened just now? Was that what I thought it was?
it's really a matter of how do you choose to see the world? And how do you choose to see your place in it, and how you relate to it? There are people who do not really value or want to see anything other than humans as the ultimate determiners, and everything else is just kind of there to serve them. I own the cat, I own the tree, I own the land. Within that mindset, there's no way to see something else as a living thing that you relate to. If you choose to see the world as having fairies in it, then you are forced into a position of seeing everything around you as something that you relate to and something that you respect. It's that choice of saying the world is alive, the world is animate, and I choose to see it that way.
The universe is amazingly alive. There is so much life around us. It is just, it's magical. And so these things called fairies are the energy that things have that is conscious.
It seems as though whenever humans find things within their environment that are wondrous, that we give those things names and personhood. We animate them in the same way that John was talking about with puppets. They are animate in themselves, but we recognize it and we name them.
Mm-hmm.
Now you see them standing tall and straight like the tree trunks, the guardians of this place. Do you know the song? They ask. You don't, but you know the wind does. So you listen as it weaves its way through leaves, tickles ferns, and ruffles the long-haired moss. The bells demand your attention. Your ears follow them. They lead you to the place where the song lives. You sing it. Your whole body vibrates with the melody, and everything around you begins to move and sway. A fairy with skin the color of moss stands atop the pulsing heap of wood and stone. One pirouette, another, then a wave of the wand, and wood, stone, and starlight spin through the air, following the fairy's dance and the swirling pattern woven by the tip of the wand. With a crescendo worthy of the sorcerer's apprentice, the fairy waves the whirling materials into an elegant structure and swings open the door. Come in. The house has been waiting for you, the fairy child, to remember the magic that swirls in your blood. Whether you walk through the door today and stay, or whether you return again and again to the enchanting glade, the house holds the key to your memories of what it is to be fairy.
Where do you find fairies?
I find fairies in the most remarkable places. I find them walking down the street. I find them in a tree. I find them in my van. I find them everywhere. And it's not a question of whether they're there. Okay, here's an interesting way of thinking about your question. Where is there? When you're communicating on the universal level, how far apart are we? Are you right across the table from me? I can hear you. As long as I can hear you, you're there for me. That's my concept of there, at least, Cell phones are confusing to me in this regard, perhaps, but I think you understand what I'm saying. The fairies had the same reaction when I said, "How big are you?" And they said, "Big?" I said, like, "How large are you?" They said, "Large?" I said, "Well, are you this tall?" They said, "Huh?" I said, "Well, are all of you this tall?" "No." "Are you this tall all the time?" "No." "Are you this tall?" "Yeah." Size and time have a totally different sense to them. And their sense of measuring dimension by time, it's just another concept that you manipulate by how you experience it and how you put the experience forward.
I was sitting someplace where there was a mirror, and the mirror was tilted slightly, and the light was coming outside and hitting into the mirror and throwing a reflection on the wall that was this shimmery, silvery, looked like fairy. And I stopped and thought about all of the stories that I've written that have something about light with fairies. And it occurs to me that in the same way that we take sticks and stones and shape a fairy house, or take clay and mold something, we take matter and shape things out of it, that's what the fairies do with light. That's how they, because light is also a thing, It's just at a much faster vibration thing than matter. And we talk about fairies being in another vibration, in the mists, beyond the veil, all of that kind of languaging. I think what we're talking about with that is the same thing the quantum physicists are talking about, that it's a different vibration, it's a different speed. And in that way, and in that place, what they shape is light. The meadow flows from the small hill on which the house sits to the ancient henge at its center. In the deep quiet of a midwinter night, winged figures stand just inside the stone circle, their faces turned to the north, their eyes alight with wonder. On this darkest night, when the sun has traveled to the furthest reaches of its realm, its fire still hovers in the sky. Undulating sheets of color dance and flow, break into swirling bands, then reform into new patterns. Ever moving, the magical spectacle of light inspires awe, even in fairies. With my experience with fairies, there's very little distance between who they are and what they do. Fairies vary depending on what's in their environment. You know, if a fairy's basic energy is as a tree spirit, that fairy shepherds trees. If a fairy's mission is to be a water sprite, it animates water. Some of them are storytellers, and it's like they themselves are a story. And they go through the world absorbing experience, and that experience is then the story. Their voices echo within the whispers of the wind. A stream rushing over stones tells their story. Their faces peer at us from the trunk of a gnarled oak, the dew puddled inside a rose, or the momentary shape of a cloud. We see them in a fleeting movement of light, or hear a distant tinkle that sounds like laughter. They are the fairies, the otherworldly presence whose legends live in every culture, on every continent, called by innumerable names and given many different visages. Fairy energy nurtures and supports life in all things. If you have ever marveled at a small tree growing out of a crack in a granite boulder, or a flower blooming in a world of concrete, you have experienced the magic of fairies. They guide trees toward the best light and help roots find essential nutrients. When you see a lush garden, you know fairies are present. Fairies hold the memory of the patterns of life. They remind the leopard how to hunt and help the whales find their songs. They remember how the spider spins her web and what route the snow geese and butterflies travel on their annual migration. Fairies sparkle in the crystalline structure of rock, teasing us with glimpses of an existence it would take eons to know. Fairy energy is the life force in every living thing in the universe, and it has profound power. In this confusion of ever-expanding inner and outer universes, we are being pushed to entirely new feats of understanding. We are developing the muscle to open our perceptions to the wonder at the heart of life. The fairies are reaching out their hands, and we are ready to see their gesture.
What is a fairy house?
When I think back over my life's experience, it feels like the fairies have been guiding me, preparing me for this work for a very long time. I spent a lot of years in Hollywood as a puppeteer, building puppets, and both as a manipulator as well as an animatronics designer and so forth. And I did a lot of model making and so on. So I've accumulated a lot of craft around doing those kinds of things. But when the fairies asked us to make them a fairy house, none of those things seemed to be germane. And what I ended up doing was something I'd never done before. And I have no idea where the idea came from. It just seemed like a good idea at the time, you know? It was just that simple. And subsequently, it's become my mode of creation. It gives me more improvisational liberty than any planned and contrived thing. Everybody always wants to know, how do you make fairy houses? And what they're thinking of is, how do you perform the craft of operations of making a fairy house? And in truth, that's the simplest of it. The thing that's the most important is the mindset with which you approach it. Because we're not trying to just simply make a model. We're trying to create a living creature for all intents and purposes. From the same almost spiritual place as a tribal medicine man would carve a mask with which to perform the ritual that requires him or her to become a lion or a bear or a coyote. And in that same manner, I'm finding twigs and creating a house that will perform in a similar fashion. This is going to be a fairy house. It's not a bird house. It's not a miniature house. It's a fairy house. And it's intended for the habitation of fairies. So I plant secret objects within them. On practically every house, there is a touchstone. And it isn't probably the most beautiful stone, because that's not the point. It's the energetic stone. And if you touch it, you can pass right through into fairy. But that's part of the magic of it, because I'm calling you to allow yourself to pass through the veil into the other worlds, and to believe that those worlds exist and that you can, by just sort of tantalizing you, intriguing you. Don't you want to try it? Wouldn't you? Have you touched one today? You know, it's those sorts of sort of teasing jibes, and I mean them most sincerely. The process begins by centering myself, because it's really essential that I find a place of balance, a place in which I'm in harmony with the universe, in which I have expressed my profound respect and love for all that is. Sacred spirits of the East, Grandfather Sun, the spirit of the sunrise, the fire, the energy, the humanity, the golden eagle. And I give thanks for the gift of the day. I call the spirits of the south, the goddess, Sister Moon, the plants that heal us and teach us and feed us, the waters that cleanse us and wash away our tears. And I give thanks for the gift of this day. And I honor the sacred spirits of the west, and I call them and ask their presence. Grandmother Earth, with all the things, living things, honor her, who gives us everything that we need to dance our dream. And to Grandmother Snake and the Stone Clan, whose hearts lie close to the earth. I ask them to accompany me on this journey. They're spirit animals of great importance to me. I call the sacred spirits of the north, God, the Father, the beginning in the beginning, the creator of creativity, and the snows of purity and the winds that bring new ideas and spread our prayers over the earth. And I honor the as above and the so below, the sacred law that all things are born through the feminine. Let nothing be done to harm the children. In honor of the people and the fairies. And so I sort of settle myself into this mindset. And it's at that point that I feel ready to go forward into the forest, or go to the sea, or to go to the desert, or wherever it is that I plan to go. Sometimes it's a long journey. And I basically go down the path trying very hard not to think. Sometimes I have to picture the color indigo, because that helps me to release all of that internal chatter and sort of let it go and let my mind kind of be a blank. And in that mindset, you're able to hear the voices, the subtle call from the various spirits around you. And I also very, very rarely, and only under specific permission, cut a living twig. I harvest twigs that have fallen. There have been times where the tree was very insistent and said to me, I want you to take this branch. This is important, and I want to join your medicine in this. You know, and it's that sort of mindset of appreciation. And then suddenly you'll have a sense to look over there. And I look over there, and lo and behold, there is the most magnificent twig. I'm blown away, and I think, wow, That looks great. I really appreciate that. Gosh, I can hardly wait to get back to the shop. And, oh, look at this. These two really belong together. And my mind, I'm placing them in the bed of sand, and I'm going like this, and oh yeah, and I could take this one, and it could kind of go down like this, and down like that, and my excitement rises tremendously, and often I will virtually run back to the shop, clutching these handfuls of twigs, saying, "Okay, Bridget, don't talk to me right now. I've got this thing to do," And I go in and start working. So that's for me the most important part. I started working in this bed of sand, and what I found was that because it was a plastic medium, I could take a twig that was twisted like this, and I could sweep the sand to conform to that particular twig. And I gradually kind of get a sense of the choreography of the house, and allow the twig to determine the shape of the wall. And that was really exciting to me, because now I was listening to the twig instead of telling the twig what to do. I wasn't trying to cram the twig into my mold. I started collecting sands from exotic locations just because it felt like the right thing to do. I'm not even sure that it was ever a conscious thing. I just started doing it. I got sand from the beach, first of all, then I got sand from some stream beds, and I went down to the Anza-Borrega Desert and collected sands from a number of washes there. There were ancient areas. There are very, very small fossils of ancient sea creatures that are 12 million years old, and pieces of petrified driftwood from a tree that lived 12 million years ago. I mean, that's tasty stuff, And it just seemed like energetically that was pretty exciting. And then people started bringing me the sand. Someone brought me some sand from Chalice Well, and they're in that area in England, and somebody else from Ireland and Scotland, and more recently from Egypt, and from the Dead Sea, and from near the place where Jesus was supposed to have been baptized, and so on. And the most recent thing, we had a visit from some monks that are from Tibet, who are now living in India, and they were touring through the area, and they did a mandala and when the mandala was complete and they had blessed it and sanctified it and stated its prayerful purpose in being made, they sweep it into a pile and give all the people present little tiny bags of sand. They give me a big, huge bag. And I also got some sand from beneath a footprint left by one of the monks. I thought that was pretty cool, That's another aspect of this, There's something fairly humble about this. This isn't an ego thing. It's not an arrogant thing. It's a recognition of something that has been appropriately blessed, and it's a prayer for peace, or it's an elegant gesture, and I try to catch that.
How do you make a fairy house?
I really am excited about these twigs. Look at those. Those ones have marvelous character. Boy, do they tell a story. Wow, just love it. And I begin by laying the twigs into a box of sand and kind of arrange them so that they make the shape of a house in a general sort of way. So then what I do is I decide what shape I want the door. Now, I have to add one thing. When I first lay out the walls, I lay them out facing me. When I finish that layout, I tack the corners together so that I can pick it up. And then I turn it over so that the whole thing ends up going face down in the sand. So now I'm working upside down and backwards. I take a little strip of brass and I set it into the sand about halfway, and that'll be the shape of the door. Sometimes I put a sill in for the bottom of the window and so on, and I scatter stone around all the other areas. And I take my brush and sort of tamp it down into the sand about halfway. The amount that everything is in the sand is the amount that will ultimately show. So that's a judgment call. And then I mix up the cold processed porcelain. It's a non-toxic substance that when it cures is completely impervious to moisture, and it also has in it stone dust, which is completely organic as well. So then I just dump it on top of the stones like this, and I sort of make a little ribbon, and I kind of lace that back and forth a few times. Okay. And in about 20 minutes, we can turn this over and we'll both see the outside of the walls for the first time. And so I end up building the 3 walls, and then I stand them up and I say to myself, okay, now how do they go together? And oh, that's impossible. No, I can't do that. How am I supposed to get that to go in there? And then I've got this to go in here. And I go, oh no, maybe I should start over. I give uncle, and when I get to that point of saying uncle, that's usually when the house tells me, no, see, it goes like this. And it all falls into place. And I think, oh yeah, right, I thought of that. The magic moment is coming. This is the make it or break it moment. There's the front. And now I have to very, very gently ease the wall around into a triangle. And now I'm going to move over to the table so I can set it down flat on the surface so that it can sort of settle in. And I set up blocks that keep the walls from collapsing. And I get it right where I want it to be. And now's my last chance to set the roof up so that I can actually put a roof on it that makes sense. If you have one wall that's got an angle like that and another wall that's got an angle like that, and you want to join the two together, you kind of go, oh, what have I done? And it's another head scratcher trying to figure out what the heck do I do to make this work, you know? And so basically I make a pattern out of paper and kind of plot out how it's going to fit. And then I take the paper pattern and turn it over and cover that with shingles that I make. Now the shingles are hand split shake shingles made out of cedar, which I get the end cuts from a cedar mill. And these are like pancakes about that thick and about this big around. And I have a shingle splitter and a big rubber mallet. And they pop off shingles that are about 1/8 of an inch thick. When I have them all glued onto the pattern, I turn that over and I cut with a bandsaw the shape of the pattern. Then I assemble those on the house and clamp them in place to hold them while I glue them, and then put a ridge cap and valleys and all that sort of stuff. And oftentimes I'll do what Bridget calls hood ornaments on the top, you know, like a chicken coop or a weather vane, or you know, sometimes a chimney, and so on. I get to a point where I say, I'm finished. This is it. I sign the bottom of the house, give it a number, call Bridget and say, it's on your table, sweetie. And kind of giggle. Because, yeah, it really feels good. It really feels good. It's kind of an emotional moment.
When the house is finished and John turns it over to me, and then I sit down with it, I ask it to tell me its story. Each house has a different kind of tone almost, and a different personality. And because each one is a different combination of wood and stone, there's a different kind of song, if you will. Follow the bells, listen to the wind, remember the path. You've allowed your imagination to be taken by the hand and led to the threshold. Now step through the doorway. Enter the enchanted wilds of the other world and reunite the realms. You've found the gateway to Fairy. Welcome home. So as I sit with it and let myself go in the door, I find out who lives there and the scene in which the house sits, the environment. And I'll twirl it around on the turntable, and I open the door and I let myself go in, and I'll find someone there and I'll introduce myself and tell the fairy, tell the consciousness that I meet there what it is that I'm wanting to do. And usually they're very happy to cooperate and tell me about themselves.
What we're really trying to do here is to honor the fact that objects have power. And if you treat those objects with respect and birth them appropriately into another bigger reality, their energy grows to the point where they're able to communicate.
That first fairy house that we put into the garden reinforced what we already believed and to some extent knew about fairy, because I'd be out there sitting in this old chair we had by the pond, and there'd be a light inside the fairy house. This is in the dark. The light would move and it would shift and come out the window. There were a whole lot of interactions we had, and that's how the fairy houses act as gateways as well, because we create them with the magical intention of having them be a gateway between the realms, so that the fairies can use them, literally, to come into our world. They're special places that, like doorways, where the energy coalesces in such a way that they can come in and zoom out one of those windows and be here with us.
There's something about the fairy houses that, because their visage has been couched in cute, because it's a miniature, attracts the childlike nature in people. People that acquire these houses are not, by and large, children. They may use a child as their excuse for buying it, but their reason for wanting to have it is because it touches something in their memories of their own childhood, in which when they were 9 or 10, everything was real, nothing was impossible. The world was a magical place, and the magic was alive in them and in the things that they played with. They served petal tea in the garden outside their bedroom window, or they dreamed about taking a voyage with this flying creature. And for that to come alive for them again seems to tap into a layer of latent creativity that is really quite remarkable. And they find pleasure in going and playing in that place. A lot of them are caused to begin journaling. A lot of them simply daydream and find their way wending back along the path to the gateway into fairy, and suddenly realize that they've found their home. And they don't know why they feel so at home there, but they do, and it's undeniable. And so that's what we've been told to do, and that's pretty much the way it works. We're going to make, generally speaking, 3-wall houses.
Question, I noticed in your...
One of the things that we have come to realize subsequent to making the first fairy house ourselves was what an emotional and enormously provocative image the idea of making a home for your fairies, for making a home for the fairies, for making a home for your fairies. How deeply personal that is. And invariably, in the process of teaching people to do that, we would teach them how to talk to twigs and stones and so forth. And then we'd send them off to gather their elements. And they would invariably come back in tears, hugging these twigs to them,
Probably for
and just
shingling, not good on
shocked at how emotional a project it was. That it wasn't just simply making a miniature, it was something deeply, deeply personal. And I remember one of them in particular, after making her house over a period of 3 days, she said to me with tears streaming down her face, "I've never had a home before." And by that, what she meant was, I've never had a home for my spirit before. I've never had a home for the spirits that I love and engage in my life before. And I thought that was really quite beautiful.
Whoa, oh my goodness. That's the sun this time. I had the moon in the last one.
That was when we really began to take seriously what it was that we were creating for people, and what some of them were creating with us in making this thing called a fairy gateway. It was a gateway into their own spirits. It was a gateway into their psyche. It was a gateway into their magical, mystical realm. I cease to put definitions on it because it's far too limiting, but I just observe that there's something really profound about that simple, sweet act of creating a home. It's a basic symbol.
What are gateways?
Well, when I say gateway, I'm thinking of something that will allow you to enter another realm other than your common everyday world. There are all different kinds of gateways. Some gateways are made out of stones, some out of crystals. Sometimes it's just a pair of trees that you see on a path and realize that there is a passageway between the two, and you ask permission of the two trees, and you put a dot of saliva on each one, and then walk through and turn around and look where you were and realize that you've traveled somewhere. Or you walk on down the path giving it very little more thought and suddenly find ideas occurring to you that seem to come from somewhere other than your own sense of creativity, or from something that you have learned or discovered on your own. Gateway is a very special place where you see a slight shimmering difference between the path through the gateway and the path on either side of the gateway.
The gateway is the space between two objects that have energy.
It could be a gap between two trees. It could be a fork in a tree. It could be a knothole in a tree. It could be the dark area between two clouds. Those are all potential gateways.
It's just like with two human beings. If we're in relationship to each other, we're standing close to each other, talking to each other, the energy that goes between us, if we're engaged, is going to be different than the energy that's on either side of us. We enhance each other's energies. Well, objects do the same thing, especially living objects. The energy between them is a little different than what's around them. So when you walk through that energy, there's a shift that happens in your perception, in the way that your energy works. In a very real way, it's tuning your insides to what's present in the environment and aligning yourself with it.
You know, it's interesting that you mentioned a conversation between two entities. You and I are talking, and we're having a conversation. And Bridget walks up toward us, and we look at her, and she's now enveloped in the sphere of our conversation. And she asks a question like, is there more coffee in the kitchen? And we say, yes, it's over there. And she says, thank you, and walks between us. She's just gone through a gateway to get coffee in the kitchen. Well, translating that to nature, it's not that dissimilar. Because you find two trees that have a fairy conversation going on between the two, and you say, excuse me, can I get to ferry through here? And they say, oh, sure, it's just right over there. And then you just pass through, and yahoo, there you are.
As I said, there's two different dimensions. And some different things make for different dimensions, but there's certain little tiny ones that are just big enough for the fairies. And that's how they get to.
It's not just physical gateways. It's gateways of the mind, of the imagination, of perception.
We're talking about seeing in a different way. We're talking about seeing with our mind. We're talking about listening. We're talking about listening with our mind.
When you change your thoughts about something, you've gone through a gateway. When there's some trigger, and that's one of the things that happens if you go through a physical gateway, it's not just your body that goes through, it's something that shifts inside of you. And when you can start to think about something differently or perceive something differently, open to a different kind of possibility, that's the whole thing about fairies. Essentially, you have to go through a gateway to allow yourself to really imagine or allow the existence of fairies in your world. That's a gateway. It's a gateway of perception, it's a gateway of thought, it's a gateway of how it is that you see the world.
Oh, here's a good photo right here. And the thing is, you don't always have to put your hand up and ask.
You know?
No, that's just one way of getting a full message through, but sometimes you just can just think it as you go through. That seems pretty basic.
Gateways help people open their imaginations, to open their eyes, all of their senses, to begin to see and feel the world of fairy all around them, the magic in them and around them.
When we talk about walking through something, that calls up mental images of what it's like to walk through something. And that translates in this rhythmic, arithmetic universe that we live in into a universal language of sorts, where now we're communicating with these entities on their level, and they're communicating with us on that level. And we ascribe to them the thoughts that come into our minds, the quality of words.
We describe it as walking through because that's what we know how to do. But the thing is movement. It's movement in your imagination, movement in your mind. And that's what the fairies teach us more than anything else, is about movement. Gateways have a lot to do with time, with the flow of time, which is not always linear.
If you were to imagine time as being a spring, and you're looking at the spring through the center of the spring, and the rotations, the turns of the spring represent the passage of time. I can stretch that spring out like this, and time, if we looked at it this way, is this distance. If we compress the spring, the same amount of time is this distance. And in walking through the gateway sometimes, if you step from one coil to another coil, because they're now in close proximity, and then that spring stretches out and you step off into normal reality, you have now advanced in time with a gap of experience.
I think most people who drive, especially freeways, have had that experience where you're driving along, you're alone in the car, and the next thing you know, you're miles down the road and you don't remember the space in between. You've gone through a mental gateway. Your mind's been somewhere else. Well, okay, your body's on this timeline. Your imagination's on another timeline. Which one's real?
There's an aspect of this that I think lends some clarity here, and that's the process of conscious dreaming. In the dream space, we are as fairies are, in that the reality that we are feeling alive in is a reality that we've imagined. And we can shape our imagining of that reality, from walking through clouds to riding on the back of a horse and raising your wings and flying like an eagle. All of those things become possible in that dream space. So when you walk the conscious reality of the wakeful world, then bring dreaming and living creatively into that process, you begin to find a whole plethora of tools that allow you to engage and interact with consciousness and matter in a totally different way. We think it in words, maybe even say it consciously out loud, and therefore it is. And then if we trust what we have created that is as being reality, then we can navigate through it in that reality as reality.
Do you believe in fairies?
The myth, as I have been told it by the fairies, is that a very long, long time ago, before written human records perhaps, there was a time when the race of fairies, which were very much conscious spirits that grew out of the earth, and the race of humans, which I gather from the fairies came from the stars, that those two races lived together, and that there was interchange between them. That as the humans forgot that they had come from the stars and became more earthbound, that how do they put it? That the humans forgot their magic and actually turned to the fairies to learn magic again. So the fairies taught the humans magic. The humans taught the fairies about form. And after a while, for whatever reasons, the humans became very jealous and frightened of the magic. And so conflict came in. There was a time when the fairies became afraid of the humans. So they worked their magic and essentially began to separate themselves from this dimension. It's as though originally there was this world, and then it kind of, the two separated and moved a little bit apart. Not very far apart, just enough so that the fairies could find safety. There were still bridges and pathways that went back and forth. The humans who still knew the magic and knew the old words and spells and ways that they'd been taught could still walk back and forth, and the fairies walked back and forth. There are lots of tales about fairy retreating into the mists, and that's what that's about. until there were only very few who could go back and forth. Part of what we have been told about this time and about the reason for doing the fairy houses is that this is a time that the fairies see when it is possible to open the pathways between the two worlds again in ways that more and more people will be able to connect with both worlds. And that's part of what the fairy houses are about. They act as gateways in order to make that process possible. There are certain ways in which we perceive the world because we've agreed, not necessarily consciously, but we have agreed that this is the way things are and this is the way things function. In this culture and in Northern European culture, especially in Britain, there may be a general agreement that if there is such a thing as a fairy, it's a little person with wings. That image is actually fairly new, like 18th century.
Victorian era.
Before that, the fairies had much more gnarly kinds of images and visages. And in other cultures, the fairies have different images. It depends on where they live. I learned a lot about the fairies from an African shaman. His people have a tradition of grottos, and they live in an area where there are grottos. In order to get into the places where the fairies are, you have to crawl on your belly through these tiny caves and through the water. And a lot of their lore around the fairies has to do with these creatures who live in the grottos. They may be little stone gnomes, or they may be creatures that hide in the hills. And there are a lot of different ways of portraying fairies that aren't the Northern European, pretty little flower creatures with wings.
It seems to me that cultures throughout time have perceived things that were like images out of the corner of their eye, or a sense of movement. There are aspects of our world that we define as not being there, because it's that which fills up all the space between the objects which we recognize as objects. When you get down to the basic, smallest particle, my hand is 1,000,000 times more empty space than it is anything that we could define as substance. To a fish, there is no such thing as water. To an eagle, there is no such thing as air. And yet they can push against the water, they can run it through their gills, they can push with their wings, and they can feel that there is something there. They can't see it. So there's a contest to define this as something. Well, in a way, what we're talking about is very analogous to that, it seems to me. How do you define a broader contextual reality that includes intelligent energy and voices from outside of yourself, from another entity that isn't embodied in human form or animal form or such?
It's part of allowing something to exist in our perceptions that is out of the box.
We have to learn to allow our perception to grow. We have to make room in our perception for all the things that might be and all the things that are based on what we've imagined. We don't know a tenth of what there is to know about what is reality. And it's so exquisite and so intriguing.
And what
And
does
trust that you
that
will.
have to do with fairy?
Who? Oh, God.
See, that's the place where I'm not sure that we've made the connection. Is that if we leave ourselves open to the possibility of fairy,
Yes.
if fairies exist, if we allow fairies to exist, then it's easier to stretch the imagination. Kids know. And when we were kids, we knew. When we were kids, we were able to create huge cities or forts or even houses for the fairies, whatever. And there's a reality to that when you're a child because you're allowing your imagination to determine what's real. And that's what we keep trying to get back to in what we do. Because I think when we lose that, we lose an enormous part of life. We lose the creativity that constantly expands what's possible. And so that's what we want to do. We want to come back. And in order to deal with fairy, you have to go back to what you knew as a child. You have to be able to let what you imagine be real.
Our childhood taught us a great deal about how to engage reality in a creative way. So here we are as adults calling back to us these experiences of our childhood and finding ways in which they're essential elements in expanding our sense of reality, expanding the communication to the universe.
Everything that I know from my experience and from what I've been taught is that whatever these things, this energy that we call fairy is, it's connected to the natural world. When you focus on the life that is in a tree and you start to understand that the life in that tree is also a fairy, then it matters if that tree gets cut down or not. And it's that kind of connecting between this tree isn't just a thing. This tree is it's not a commodity. It's a living entity. And in that living entity is a spirit that is something we call fairy. So that I stop to think before I do something that interacts with it in a negative way. So I at least stop to think. Because I don't see any other way for us to get to a place on this planet where we have enough respect for the other living things on the planet to not destroy them just because we can.
people who live in the fairy world for a whole variety of reasons. Some people live there because it's cool. Some people live there because it's fun. Some people live there because there's a deep and profound belief in the mystical aspects of all of this.
In the early spring, the Green Man is the May Queen's consort. So you have the female power and the male power coming together to create the spring, and that leads into summer.
People who are into fairies, who dress up with wings, who subscribe to Fairy Magazine, come to fairy festivals, are people, for the most part, for whom fairy is connected to the natural world in some way.
This is not a question of either gender or age, because there are people who are very young who just innately believe in this and are remarkably astute in talking about it. I've had the same conversation or similar ones with grandmothers, with teenagers of both genders. And they all have different reasons for wanting to be there. There's a lot of commonality, though, around the fact that they've had some kind of an experience that was satisfying to them. And some kind of experience that stimulated their zeal for adventure, to try and find out more, to try and have it happen again. People ask me, do you really believe in fairies? Kind of a silly question in a way, because it's like saying to me, do you believe in nature?
One night I was just eating dinner. It was like on Christmas Day. And I saw like this little fairy all in like wool or something, running around with a little lantern, frantically looking for something with a little backpack on, frantically looking like he had lost like his most important item.
It was like a giant leaf folded in half, and then I put two smaller leaves for pillows.
Oh, wow. That sounds really cool. And it was on a stump or
The
or
fairy
next to a stump?
houses are gateways, and they are a way to bring the imagination and the magic of fairy back into this world and to allow humans to connect to that place of the child inside that knows that all things are possible, that life begins with an open and unlimited imagination. To begin to see and feel the world of fairy all around them, the magic in them and around them.